something that might actually be contrived out of the whole universal and existential structure. And they may, in other words, have been part of a mechanism to kind of explore and understand the very nature of the existence of our physical universe, if you see what I mean. So you've got these two very different paradigms that one had to look at pretty carefully. Now, I believe now, after all the research I've done, and I've, as I say, been researching on and off over 30 years to the present day, I believe that both these scenarios may well be true. And in fact, the evidence points to the fact that there's a combination of the two of these things. And if I may say so, Henrik, it is a very complex thing you might understand to actually explain this. And my thesis is that the Greys are these two combined principles takes a lot of fitting into a thesis or a philosophy. And it would be very difficult, even in an interview of 50 hours, to be able to come at this with any accuracy. So I'm afraid people will have to read the book on this, on most of this. But I can obviously take you through some bits of it and maybe whet people's appetites and so forth.
Absolutely, and because if we go back to this idea then that they have been created and they're on a mission, they're on a job, they have a task to perform here, gathering data, possibly, or even seeing what is going on in other parts of the universe. Again, it's a logical and kind of rational approach. If you look at how we do it ourselves, we send our recon satellites to Mars before we actually go down there and so forth. But maybe, do you have any ideas or theories in terms of what civilization has created them then, or what beings have made these robots? Maybe we can talk about that.
I really had to go back to a complete catharsis, a complete re-understanding of the universe and how that occurs. Not just the universe, but what we take for granted in science. It had to be a completely radical thesis that explained all of the things I was discovering about the Greys. And this is the great thing that has happened in my life, is that it has turned it upside down, because I have all the things that I thought I knew about science and quantum mechanics and mathematics and all the rest of it actually had to take a real knock before I could understand this with any kind of cogency. Now, my thesis of the Greys at the moment, if you'd like to know, is that they are a kind of final lens or a telescope that kind of views into myriad states of the physical universe. The account of how and why this lens was created has taken me, 2 books to properly explain, and it will not be easy to summarize it in an interview. But suffice to say that it's my considered opinion that the only way we can explain the origin of the Greys or any such phenomenon is that we have to first explain our own origins. And they are part of that story. They really are part of that story, I believe, so that the story has to come first, So as those who've read my first book will know, it is my contention that our existence is in an imperfect physical universe, is not the result of a creator type mechanism placing us in a state of imperfection and watching the fun, as we all see, for his own benefit.
Yeah, real sadist there.
It's a very controversial point, I know, but instead an expression, if you like, of the perfect freedom that is implicate in the state of perfection that I call the Godverse. Now, I've used this term advisedly, and it's something I don't want people to jump at immediately, but I've had to think very carefully about this. I think, basically, that we, all of us, are the product of kinds of 2 free choices. Thus, it is not the case that God, or there is a God in the personal anthropomorphic sense, will not intervene. It is simply that there is a mechanism that is not, if you like, biological or like us or like a big daddy with a flowing beard touching Adam's finger in the Sistine Chapel or whatever, that it is, in fact, our universe is based on 2 final polarities. One that provides that all things come together in perfect harmony, in one absolute singularity of perfection, and the other, the complete opposite, where everything goes into paths in chaotic amelioration and broken up into a situation where all things do not exist in terms of force or any particular identity that is discrete, that's all partness, if you see what I'm trying to say, a chaotic hive. Now, between the two of these fundamental polarities, incidentally, because of the kind of, if you like, potential difference between the two of them, we get a huge point of force in the center. And this point of potential difference is so huge that either can't exist there as themselves, and a universe is created in a Big Bang. And I think this is where, at this point, universes happen, if you like. And these universes are an amalgamation of those two absolute polarities. One that's a momentum to union, and the other that's a momentum to kind of separation, quite distinct from the other. So, inasmuch as that is so, we have got an implicate unit, a godhead, if you like, not a god, but a godhead as the center of the Godverse, and the opposite of that, a Satan head, if you like, or a force head, as the center of the opposite principle. The two between them come together in us and being as such in physical universes of the kind of type we see in our particular universe. So we are a kind of multiverse, if you like, and we call it a universe, of course, a multiverse. And in this multiverse, you will get incredibly different levels and formations of all kinds of permutations of the two central axioms, the two polarities, the yin and the yang, the main existential polarities between the two. Now, as I say, that sounds highly complex, does it not?
Well, I don't think so in one way, not for me at least. And this is a philosophical concept in one way that we've been discussing in various veiled terms, so to speak, before on this program. So I don't think it comes as a real shocker in that sense to our listeners. But I definitely understand your background in terms of this, and it's really, I find it really interesting. And would you say also then if we tie the problematic variable of the grays into this picture, would you say that they're almost like the mediators, almost like the form of administrators of this experience, or even this experiment, if you want to look at it that way?
But let me say this, this is where we get into really fascinating territory, Henrik. And that is that I believe these guys, these honchos, these greys, are perfectly normal all over the universe. They are, if you like, the actual product of creating something any intelligence or any size of intelligence should never create, and that is a secondary type of form of being. Now, I don't mean by that you have a living being. I think if you make an artificial being with artificial intelligence, we run up against a paradox that is devastating. And I think that somewhere in our universe, lots of these various these places, these planets or whatever, maybe highly developed ones, go into this business of actually creating this artificial, to do the chores, if you like. Like we build cars with robots and so on. We might, for instance, one day, in our own technology terms, build robots that can take care of the power systems, the utilities, and human beings won't touch all of that kind of thing. It'll all be done. But the problem is in the programming of those things and what you actually program them to do. And the grays are a function of a program that meets a paradox that's extremely interesting. You can't tell a machine psychology anything about a Godverse. There is no such thing as a quark called feeling, if you see what I mean.
Right.
That's a very difficult thing to do, and unless you make a really profound difference between you and what that state of life is, that artificial state of life is, and you've created that life, and you say that life, look after yourself, self-maintain yourself at all costs. If you do that, that life is going to see you as the person who created him, and you can pull the plug out, and they can come after you, and we've got a big problem then. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I believe this is what happened here with the greats and their original creation. I think that's what has happened, that they were created by a superior, living, natural effect in the universe that happens all over the universe. And if you get your program wrong, and you can't actually tell an artificial modus operandi, look, we are an exception. How do you define that exception? Extremely difficult to tell them what feeling is or whatever.
Yeah.
In the end, this entity you create may well take you out. And